C'est Will, petite vidéo aujourd'hui, découverte des bonus. On a fait le 100 retour en live et on va choisir un autre mode aujourd'hui, pas le guitare en jeu libre. C'est quoi les galeries miniatures? Ah oui, c'est pas ça que je veux faire. Voilà, les niveaux perdus. On va se faire un peu les petits niveaux perdus aujourd'hui. Tac tac, démarrer.
You're about to play an unfinished level from The Last of Us Part 2.
Alors les niveaux perdus,
The reason we added this section is there
ça
are
c'est
a few
le...
sequences, and we picked the 3 of the best ones that we cut from the game. You know, often we build a game that's much bigger than what ends up being the final product. They're months away from being finished, but we wanted to give you an insight of what it's like when we built the game, because often we have this whole thing constructed and it doesn't have final art or audio or dialogue.
Le papa
and
de
here you get to
Telou.
see the building blocks of what it's like when we first string a bunch of these levels together. This is the intro to the first deleted level, and this one is the roughest of the 3. We wanted to show more of how Jackson operates. So this is the festival where Ellie ultimately kisses Dina. This sequence would have come very late in the game as a flashback sequence while you're in the farm with Dina. And we wanted to show what is the rest of Jackson doing, and wanted to put on the stick, make it interactive. So you could see when you're outside, there are all these almost like carnival games that you can play. You could mix drinks, you could play with these kids that are playing a sort of clicker Marco Polo, sit down and listen to conversations. And all the different interactions were first or second pass, very, very early passes. The building blocks are there, but nothing is final. And ultimately, while we were very excited by this sequence, it's pretty fun and lighthearted. It just slowed things too much as we're barreling towards the end of the story at this point. So again, reminder, rough, missing audio, missing animation, missing gameplay tweaks, missing dialogue, but pretty representative of what it would have been. So, enjoy.
Enjoy. En gros, c'est tout ce qu'il avait fait. C'est des scènes qu'il avait tournées, qu'il avait fait en jeu en fait. Il les a pas introduits dans le jeu en fait, la fin finale. Il n'a pas voulu les mettre. Excellent.
Originally, this level was going to transition us to farm. We would go all the way through to the dance, where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar at night, she would remember the Seth incident. So, the opening for something we really wanted to do was highlight the way their lives had turned upside down since she went down this path. We had this idea of recontextualizing all of our usual gameplay mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes, throwable weapons, and even the infected, which is my personal favorite. Peppered throughout the level are moments of levity or shared history, all the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before a huge revenge odyssey.
Trop bien. Alors pour ceux qui ont fait le jeu, ça en fait c'est le moment où après Dina et Ellie s'embrassent. On reconnaît bien la musique dedans.
The makeup artist is pretty simple. It's one of those little in-game scenes. This is one of my favorite sections because I think that it achieves both the slice of life aspect of Jackson while also being a stark reminder of how dark the world that they live in really, really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this adorable, messed up little clicker impression, and the others would giggle. We tried a version where if you got close enough, the kid might try to follow you a little before turning back. Since clickers are blind and move by echolocation, for this game of messed up tag, Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the children give themselves away. The thought was that these kids are in relative safety. They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and runners, and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play. When the festival got cut, they tried to preserve this moment and move it to the front of the game, where the snowball fight is, as a tutorial. However, being in the headspace of a
Ils ont
clicker
l'air
doesn't really
tellement
teach
bien
you
là.
how to deal with them. Eventually, it evolved, and they instead made the snowball fight. There's a hidden spot at the back that was just a bit of fun. It was highlighting Jackson's normalcy with something we would find in a real world. In the back, you would find teenagers finding some alone time with each other in a dark corner of a party. It was rewarding the player for
Maria.
peeking into a hidden corner, but ultimately redirecting them back to the festival. We also had versions of them smoking weed here, despite Maria's consternation, probably having gotten it from Eugene.
D'accord, ça c'était la fête. Go. Les égouts maintenant. Lost level Seattle
In
Sewer.
this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle. This comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of a window and gets swept away by the current. And then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current. Ultimately, with a lot of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them were for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final, but it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
Thank you. Remonte. Qu'est-ce qu'elle fait? Allez. Voilà, c'est bon.
Je déteste Seattle.
This level, internally known as Find Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance
Ah, faut que j'aille là, moi.
inside of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game-wide, however it remained in essence in the section
Je pense qu'il faut aller par là.
aquarium as Ellie when you were avoid. When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a
Oh.
dead end. The real reason for this dead end room is that on the reversal when exiting back out of
J'ai
the
hâte de
doorway,
sortir de
players
ce
are
trou.
faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been
Ah ouais,
able
mais
to
là,
see when they were swept past it on the
j'aurais dû
way
faire
in,
ce qu'il y avait à la
suddenly
porte
looks
d'abord.
in from view when on the side platforms. The
Il y a
intention
une
here
porte.
being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out.
Voilà.
Throughout the rest of the level, we also used light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. We slowly introduced the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight
Vers le
spaces.
haut.
This is to
Je dois
slowly build
continuer à
up
monter
to
pour
and
ressortir.
encourage the player to climb into. We added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item, and we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface. We loved the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny dirty pipe in order to get out, as it was a great opportunity to use our prone
Pas le moment de
mechanic.
craquer,
The
Ellie.
unique camera setup was created to support crawling in these pipes, as the standard prone camera is much higher above the
Oh, ils auraient dû mettre dans le
We
jeu
also
ça.
created custom collision in order for Ellie to maneuver.
On voit que c'est pas, on voit que c'est pas terminé.
Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort in order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate. We'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we change from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself. Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. As we surface from the water and over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel. A clicker that has sprouted and fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attacking. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment. This clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centerpiece of that experience. Whereas
Flippant.
in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
Oh merde!
Ah, nous on arrive directement là. Dans le jeu on arrive là directement. Ils ont enlevé qu'un petit bout. Ils ont enlevé cette scène avec Joël déjà.
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped.
Je trouve ça un peu dommage quand même.
On
sait bien qu'ils l'ont mis là, mais-
And what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge. The last ladder climb is quite lengthy.
Bon, ça va être fini du coup. Hein.
Trimmed it down to a shorter climb. We liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Ouais. Et la chasse. The Hunt.
For this third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right after the whole Seattle Abby sequence where Abby spares Ellie. And then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now? So we're coming in on Ellie and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror in a way the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar. And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how
la chasse de
the
sanglier.
violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her. She's still experiencing these PTSD moments. This was a sequence that was pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal. So this part of the story
Ah
that we
oui.
developed, still
Ah, ils l'ont mis
made
dans le
its way into the
bouquin.
game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it now.
Où est-ce que t'es?
So the boar hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on. It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite
Ça, c'est à
right.
la fin quand elle est revenue.
The level happened after the Jackson
Elle a
Festival,
devait chasser
so it
le
got cut. But before
sanglier. Nous, on la voit juste chasser un
once
lapin
the
en fait.
festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone. Her hair is short. So maybe this is the future or the present. In early iterations of the fight, it was more arena-like. The player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling... We must have gone through 5 or 6
Excellent.
iterations of the boar fight and all.
C'est
and
vraiment-
every single
ça, c'est
time
beau.
it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range. We tried another where you're getting close and you get to jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally, we tried a bunch where you almost sort of...
Quand c'est comme ça me fait penser à Days Gone.
And try and wrestle it. We uncovered after some time that taking down a boar over several phases felt very laborious and a little dramatic. It was comically long. It felt too boss-like, a little too gamey. We decided the gas station was built to highlight the boar's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the boar feels larger. We also feel trapped with it, though perhaps it's trapped with us. When it charges, it gets to us quickly, so we must be on our toes. This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of hunting for trouble mindset. Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly so it didn't hear you. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way? Or is the shot worth the cost after? It feels like a gamble. By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles, or would burst through the back, and Ellie would follow it and finally enact revenge.
Tu m'échapperas pas.
Allez, porcinet. Viens ici. T'es là,
The
hein?
boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious. With the boar whimpering at the back of the gas station after Ellie's relentless hunt. After this,
Oh, le pauvre. Faut abréger les souffrances, là, hein? Putain, dire qu'elle a tué des milliers d'humains, là, bah, elle peut pas tuer un sanglier. Et voilà, c'est fini, les amis. Voilà, ce niveau est une version pré-alpha inachevée qui reflète son état quand il a été supprimé du jeu. C'est dommage parce que ça, c'est vraiment bien. Toutes les scènes sont bien. Alors, la chasse, je pense, c'est le mieux. Ouais. En tout cas, voilà, les amis, j'ai présenté les niveaux perdus. Donc, si vous voulez voir d'autres vidéos, d'autres actualités, n'hésitez pas à vous abonner avec un petit pouce bleu. A plus, les amis. Tchou.